What's up? Welcome to another episode of Let's Chat Eavesdrop Edition. This is episode 7 of this series of this, I don't know what you want to call it, a podcast series, a video series, a web series, but it's been just so good to be able to chat with my fellow colleagues. Of course, my fiance is also joining us. So Marianne, Zakwang, Dylan, and Fern. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Let's Chat Eavesdrop Edition. To those of you who are watching, thank you again for just watching the previous episodes and listening in, giving us your feedback, asking us questions. If you notice, we even included some of the questions that you've asked us on Instagram as sub questions throughout the series, and so we really appreciate you watching this. If you have not, please go subscribe to our channel right now, and of course you can like this current video right now, right? So you can do both of that right now. Before we start today, you see most of us growing out our hair during this MCO, FMCO, EMCO, whatever, wherever you are in Malaysia or out of Malaysia lockdown. You see most of us not being able to go to the hairdresser or the barber. However, Marianne has a different look and went the opposite direction. And before we start today's episode, we just want her to explain why and how we can respond to this action of hers. Marianne.
Yep. So for those who are tuning in for the first time, I'm a girl, right? I'm sporting a rather strange hairdo. And the reason for that is that my husband, Daniel, and we've been running a food aid to provide food supplies to vulnerable families across the Klang Valley and outside of the Klang Valley in this recent lockdown. And of course, as part of our fundraising efforts, we are sporting this cool new hairdo. By the way, my husband shaved this. Yeah, he shaved my hair off for me yesterday, so that we are able to, just carry out this fundraising to continue the work that we are doing in feeding those who need to be fed at this time.
Thank you so much, Marianne. So how can we help in this effort? How can someone watching today help in this effort?
I think contributing to the effort would be great. And usually we do that through means of our ministry partners who contribute to us. There are also a lot of ongoing food relief efforts being carried out by certain NGOs, which I think that would be great for people who are hearing or tuning in this to contribute towards now. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of information being shared online. If you would like more information, please do get in touch with us, whether it's through leaving a message here or contacting us on our social media, and we'll be happy to get in touch to perhaps give you a bit of links to how and where you can be putting your support in terms of finance, or even support in kind at this time for those who are really in need and struggling. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marianne. So for those of you who are watching, we will include some of these links down in the description. You can go and check them out after this video. Now, we are back on the topic of relationships, and we covered does age and race really matter in the previous episode. Now we're going to talk a little bit deeper into a relationship and some of the aspects of a relationship that is basically in full force. And so if you are 16 years old and below, we would just like to warn you that this episode might actually be more appropriate for those youth and young people who are 16 years old and above, because we will be discussing pretty sensitive topics when it comes to a relationship. So let's start things off. Today we will be discussing about cohabitation and boundaries in a relationship. How far can you go in a relationship physically? Is cohabitating, okay for a Christian to do? Yeah, maybe just to explain the definition of what actually is cohabitation. Cohabitation is just the act of staying together, two people sharing a space or sharing a home together. Okay, of course, usually in the context of a relationship lah. So let's just kick things off by asking Zakwang, growing up again. Let's take it back. What were you taught And how were you taught what you were taught?
And then they always say, oh, Christian cannot stay together. It's always that, like, yeah, Christians, if you're together, stay apart, stay away, don't do anything that can compromise. I remember there was this uncle that came to me say, yeah, when I was with my wife, last time haven't wife yet, still fiance. When we travel, we must make sure that we avoid staying in the same dormitory this must be separate rooms. And then they were telling a story once also that they were caught once that it was just the two of them needing to stay in that little dormitory. And I think what happened was that something along the idea of one person staying there and then buy another accommodation somewhere else so that so that nothing compromise can happen. So I did grow up with a very strict sense on that. Just don't do anything that can compromise. Like even they say that, not even like, even though that both of you will not succumb to temptation per se, that other people will also be a bit looking at you weirdly. So because as church leaders and people who are seniors in the church, you need to, in a sense, protect also that image, that even though you didn't do anything, but if let's say you go and then you stay in this other place, even though you didn't do anything, people might look at you in a certain way. So that's how I grew up. And essentially I did think about it, and those rebellious stage, you question but I'll admit that I did learn reasons as to why. But I think before I go reasons, maybe others can also share like their growing up experience.
Marianne, what's your thought on this?
Wow. I came from a church background where I think boundaries were very strongly drawn to a point. I mean, and perhaps not even really clearly explained. I think what leads to the tendency to want to rebel and push the boundaries, right? So it was as bad as like you would hear things as like, okay, when you're 18 and when you're dating, make sure you don't hold hands, because that's just not a holy thing. As to why that's the case, it was never told to us. Like holding hands is like for after you get married, and seriously to that certain extent, and so therefore, when you talk about cohabiting, that was totally out of the question, isn't it? It's like, oh, Christians don't do things like that because it's not good, it's not godly. But it was in some sense, as a young person, it was never really explained to you why that is not permissible. Of course, I think beyond just the Christian community, when we were growing up, things are changing very fast now, right? But when we were growing up, being in an Asian community in general, cohabiting was actually frowned upon. I mean, those of you who lived a bit more when I was growing up, so if they knew about a couple who were not married but were somehow cohabiting together, the whole community would, like, especially those who are elder, right, would actually frown upon this act and usually we're saying like weird things are going on, you bring dishonor to your family. I don't know how. I think this perception is changing very fast these days, but that was what I experienced growing up. So it wasn't just what you heard within the Christian community, but I think what was intertwined also was a lot of like family honor, family needing to have face, that kind of a thing, and keeping Asian values. So it was all mixed and mashed up in that, and we never really got clear reasons, even really good biblical reasons as to why you don't do these kind of things. So you just know you don't do it, because God doesn't like it. That's all we knew.
So maybe I asked my fiance V, when you grew up and you were actually taught what was right, what were the actual reasons given to you that you could live by, or what were the principles that you could live by based on what was taught to you?
It was never brought up. I think it was just like, even it's just like, okay, when you're ready to get married, and then after you get married, then you live together. So it was never really like brought up, and I don't know, like, I guess my parents at least didn't mention it. In church, I guess in uni, that's when cohabitation happens for most people, and the CF would like talk about it more, And the reasons being, like, of course, temptation. And the second one is like you still are your own person. You're not committed for life yet. You're not, I mean, under God, you're not bonded. So that there shouldn't be like living together is something quite a big deal lah, and that's like reserved for marriage. It's part of the journey, part of the, you know, like the package deal. And there's definitely going to be things that you have to adjust to. Yeah, so that's like, I guess it's also like the idea that you should have your own space and like grow as your own person first. And cohabitating pushes a lot of boundaries. Yeah, and it causes like it just opens the door for temptation lah.
Yeah. So before we get to Dylan, I have a question for Marianne, Kwang, and Fern. We can just throw out, oh, okay, we talked about family honor, we talked about what the church taught us, what our parents taught us, but at what point did you all come to say like, I won't do this because I know this is right based on what the Bible says?
I think there's definitely two points that actually interestingly Guang brought up just now that was told to him by his ugly uncle. It really is the right answer. I think it just needs to be explained and drawn out properly from the Bible to young people to help them to understand. And so I think the first one that we can understand, like when Paul writes to the Christians in Corinth, right, in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, he tells them that, you know, you don't belong to yourself anymore. You know, so you don't live to just satisfy your own desire, you know, like food for the stomach and the stomach for food. It doesn't work that way. But you belong to the Lord, you know. And so therefore he was speaking in the context of like abstaining from sexual immorality. And he says your body is it's a temple of the Holy Spirit, and God lives in you. So your whatever you do with your body must honor God. Right. And so if you recognize that you are not the boss of your life, you're not the owner of your life, then what God has to say about how you conduct yourself, even like say sexually, matters, right? And of course, going back to cohabitation, like Ethan was mentioning, that it just two people of the opposite sex being in a relationship, staying together. When you say it that way, it already sounds very obvious that, you know, the tendency to push boundaries to the point that the relationship becomes sexual, it's very high. And if the Bible tells us to flee temptation, then that's what we ought to do. So setting yourself up with all the ideal opportunities, right, in cohabiting, right, in for any of these sinful things to happen, just sounds like a very bad idea. Yeah, it seems like instead of fleeing temptation, you're running towards it, and you're setting everything up so that anything bad can happen. Yeah, so be careful lah. If you think you're standing firm, you may fall. You know, and the Bible tells us that as well.
Yeah. Something that I remember telling some of my students who enter college, then like, oh, you know, staying in dormitories, it's like, oh, it's cheaper to stay in the same apartment lah, this lah, that lah, because they say, oh, you not enough rooms, just stay in the same room, it's fine. But in terms of definitely on a Christian context, we understand that sex is a big thing. All right, it's not something to be taken lightly, and we understand the idea of having sex in the boundaries of marriage. But to just come to the understanding first foundation that, okay, sex being in the boundaries of marriage, that exactly what Marianne said, that in a sense, staying together, all right, just staying together. And because, you know, got some of those kids, they try to find loopholes and they, what if I stay together and don't have sex? Cannot. If you just put it like that, you say, there's nothing wrong lah. Okay, if you want to just put it like on sheets of paper, like, there's nothing wrong just staying together, whatnot. But exactly what Marianne said, that how, like, we all are human. There will be a limit in terms of how much you can essentially control yourself, especially when two people of opposite gender, not just opposite gender, when both of you have feelings for each other some more. The boundaries will be broken. And that's something that you cannot it's something that, you know, no one can deny. So at the end of the day, that's why we say no to cohabitating in terms of the Christian context, because exactly what Marianne said, just don't put yourself in the situation where you can be tempted in that way. Yeah. So just avoid it, because at the end of the day, if it's just the two of you inside that room, and there's no one else watching, and you do this for what, a year before you get married or whatnot, to say that you will refrain, I don't know who you're trying to lie to lah. Yeah.
I think like for me, when the question was asked, I was just thinking of the verse like, man will leave his father and mother and live with the other person, right? So then I think within the Asian context, it's very normal that we live in our parents' house until we like get married. But even if we were to move out like before we get married and stuff, it's like, there's still this whole idea that okay, we are not one person. So there's a lot of things when it comes to living, right? Like doing the dishes, or like even buying things and like money, things like that. So it's like, it's really, I feel like cohabitating, it really doesn't need to be done. If you're really very committed, then you can take the proper steps and get married. There's like, and if you are not ready to get married, then you shouldn't be living together. Yeah, that's just what I'm thinking lah.
Yeah.
Can I throw in just another quick thought as to why? And also linked to what Guang said, that uncle told him, which I think is a lot of wisdom, just needs to be explained. The idea of the world is watching us, right? The world is watching Christians, right? And who are we called to be? We are the salt of the earth, we are the light of the world. Okay, fine. If you want to draw this crazy question of saying that, I can stay with somebody I like, but not do anything, like we just stay together, and have our own space, or but we keep ourselves sexually pure, whatever lah. But the question will be, when someone looks on the outside, and with the general perception of cohabiting and what goes along with that, when the world looks at Christians, what do they think, right? They probably say, oh, this, living together probably comes hand in hand, right, with sleeping together, and that's totally fine. And so when a non-Christian or an outsider looks at a Christian couple cohabiting, and if really they abstain and and all that, but the perception that is given to outsiders from the outside will still be like, oh, okay, so Christians are pretty cool with this, Christians are fine with this, but we know that that's not the case. And so if we want to, if we know we are children of God, we need to walk wisely, right? The Bible says, walk wisely, conduct yourself wisely in the way in relation to outsiders, because they're watching you, and you are called to shine for Jesus, and doing anything, even if it is supposedly neutral, to say, but it is unwise in and of itself, to that doesn't bring glory and honor to Jesus at the end of the day. It's something that we don't want to do, because ultimately in the end, who is our Lord, who's our boss, who's our Savior? Is it not Jesus, right? Do we want to like, be guilty of like dragging his name through the mud, even if we don't mean to do it, but we shouldn't. So I think that therefore a lot of wisdom needs to be exercised in this whole concept of like cohabiting. So I think the only time you should stay together, live together, is when, like Ethan said, when you have decided to do the right thing and get married.
I just want to ask Dylan, growing up in a non-Christian background, what were you taught? What did your parents teach you, or what was your perception about cohabitating?
I guess that's the difference. When I think, if I'm not wrong, I won't say it's anyone that taught, because I don't think we were taught, but generally it stays on the idea of, as long as you don't do like sex, then that's okay. That's what I think, what I've seen also. I wouldn't say too much because it's too sensitive, but all I say is that I do think that trust is an important aspect, but as what most of us have said, whatever you do behind closed doors, no one knows. So that will still be a risk. Of course, you can trust them, saying that, I mean, people can just lie also, right? That's the simple truth. You can say, oh, nothing happened, no one will know, technically, unless they go and tell the truth, right? So in my opinion, I think it's not emphasized when you don't come from a I wouldn't just say Christian, but maybe like religious or a certain set of rules that you have regarding sex, like for example, it won't be emphasized. So it's more built on trust, as in like I would say between the relationship of the parent and the children, like how much trust do we have for each other to allow another partner to come and stay. Yeah, the aspect of trust is very important, even if it's not based on Christian values, because in the end, who you bring back matters. Like, oh, if you think this is a good person, you won't really do anything, then generally it's okay. So that is the more practical, but not from a Christian perspective kind of like issue. They just don't want to risk it. Because if it does happen, then like, that's when you have like, how do you say, no offense, but like when you're young and then suddenly hear, I thought these two person just got together, why suddenly married? Then something happened. And that happens quite often actually, from what I know. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I think it's very insightful to hear your perspective on this.
I don't know where this is the right time for me to actually bring this up. There are people who are saying that, you need to stay together because staying together will reveal things about the relationship that can make or break the relationship. So better experience those before you commit in marriage so that you know for sure that you can marry this person. Yeah, so you need to cohabitate to know for certain that I can marry this person. Yeah, because there's only things when you stay, there's only things that you'll find out about the person when you stay together. Yeah. So how would you address that? Because these are, the thoughts that even coming up from students in college and university, saying, oh, I want to get to know the person more. If I want to marry a person, I need to know everything before I get, before I get married. So I need to stay so that I know everything about the person. So yeah, how would maybe we address this sort of question that comes up?
So if it's anyone who actually follows entertainment, etc., like celebrities and whatnot, honestly, like you can see loads of examples, right, where they cohabitate. They get together, they fall in love. Wow, news like, they're in a relationship and they're here, they're there, and they're moving together. And then after a while, they tie the knot, and before you know it, right, maybe 6-7 months, maybe 2-3 years down the line, what happens? They divorce. So if you look at that lifestyle and you look at you look at that trend, then you can automatically also kind of conclude that in your mind that using common sense that if you're looking at the general statistics in Hollywood and whatnot in media, right, cohabitation doesn't guarantee a happy marriage, right? I mean, in some sense also, it's like when you look at celebrities, very often you'll say like, I don't expect their marriage to last long, right? And we often know that when they're in relationships, they're actually cohabiting at some point. And so I don't think that you can even say cohabitation is a guarantee that you will get to know everything about a person and therefore be able to commit to getting married to them. To be honest, right, we are constantly getting to know people better and better. And there isn't a point where you actually know somebody like completely all your life. Like even say down to like being married to Daniel for 7 years, we're still learning things about each other. Every day, we're still getting to know each other. But what keeps us together at the end of the day, right, isn't like, oh, because I know Daniel so well or because he knows me so well, but because we have made this commitment before God and before his people and to each other that we are going to love each other until death do us part. And in doing so, we want to demonstrate, we also want to be our marriage to be a very pale reflection of Christ and his people. And that's what keeps us together, you see. There's a covenant in and of itself, not so much as like, how well do I know you or how well do you know me at the end of the day. Yeah, so that I mean, things you discover about each other when you start to, throughout your whole life will actually surprise you. Right to the very end, I think.
Is it because like as a non-Christian, you are trying to look for like the perfect person, whereas as a Christian you already have Jesus and like you know that your spouse is not going to complete you or like your other half is not going to ever be able to complete you. But then as a non-Christian, maybe you want to find like the best fit or someone who really like ngam with you lah, right? So then they feel like, oh, I need to cohabitate in order to really find like look at all the different aspects of this person. But at the same time, just because you cohabitate doesn't mean the person's not going to change. But then like when you really see or get to know them through their friends, their family, the people who actually know them. That's like where you can tell their personality instead of just like, yeah, like straight away going to stay with them. And then if anything is bad, like works out badly, there's going to be a lot more complications, you know? Like there's so many things tied to living in a space. Yeah, so that's just what I was thinking.
Yeah. Actually, that's such a good thought. You know, the idea that, you know, we as Christians, we're not looking exactly for the perfect person because we already found it.
Correct. And I think in the end also it talks about like where you place your security, isn't it? Like for instance, if your ultimate goal in life is like, okay, I'm living for the here and the now, and so my ultimate goal is to have as secure a marriage as possible, and I definitely need to get like the right person so that I make sure that I have the happiest life possible in this world. Then you're placing your security in the wrong thing, or the wrong person. We as Christians know that life comes with its fair share of sufferings, isn't it? Suffering and pain, and it's not going to be the ideal. You're never going to live your most fulfilled life here on earth, right?
Yeah.
And so that even as we are working out, we are working out like how Paul write about it. He tells the Philippians, you work out your salvation with fear and trembling, right? In this life together, as husband and wife, you're still looking forward to something so much bigger. Right, that day where we, like as the bride, we see our bridegroom, that is Jesus face to face, and that's the thing that we are looking forward to. So it's not so much as like, okay, I need to make sure that I put all my put all my chips in the right place and make sure that I get like the buy-in for this right marriage, because this is all I have to look forward to in life, and I messed up if I have made this mistake and there's no turning back, that kind of thing. That's placing your security in the wrong place. But if your security ultimately is found in Jesus, then you have a very different concept of approaching this matter. And I also kind of think that when two people cohabit, it very much speaks for the relationship itself. Like it's very self-serving. Even though people might deny it, right? They say like, oh, what such thing, what such thing as self-serving? But yeah, because you haven't made a commitment of any sort, right? So you're telling yourself like, okay, if I don't like this person after a while, I'm just gonna pull out and say goodbye, and at least I haven't signed any papers. I don't have to go through the hassle of a divorce. So good lah. It seems to work out both ways, but it's self-serving, right? Which is the Bible tells us we're not supposed to do. In being committed to a relationship, like two Christians who are in a relationship working towards marriage must already be thinking of the interest of the other person more than yourself, right? And so if you are thinking of the interest of the other person more than yourself, then you'll be saying like, we are in this together and we are committed, right, to be able to see this through into marriage so that we can enjoy the gifts that are made, that are given by God, that are sacred for marriage, like sex, right? And therefore serve one another. It's not about like what's in it for me and how I can come out not being hurt or not being scarred or being the safest possible with the minimal damage kind of thing, but it's more of like what I can give, in this relationship to the other person, so that ultimately what we do in our relationship or how we conduct ourselves pleases God at the end of the day. I hope that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna add on because now like Marianne talked about how like difference between like if you just cohabitate before marriage is like lacking commitment. I think another thing I would say is also like if the argument is just to say that, oh, okay, if I cohabitate then I can know this person better, what would be the time frame? Like is 1 week enough, 2 months enough, 2 years enough, 3 years enough? Then like if he doesn't want, then you just break it off. So what's the point? It ends up being like it's kind of a waste of time, like if I really were to think about it. And if you want to cohabitate so long and still cannot get married, then why are you even going on so long for? Just become friends and then get out and settle down with someone else. It's very different from just like casually, okay, I just want to stay with this person. Okay, I wouldn't deny maybe you do like this person, or maybe there is feelings, maybe there are plans, to actually get together, but it's a different kind of commitment. But my main argument is the time frame. So when is enough, when is not enough? Are you gonna keep like saying that, oh, I still don't know this person yet, I still don't know this person yet? But like what you say, like you'll never fully know someone.
I mean, Marianne brought up just now about how the entertainment industry or Hollywood kind of portrays cohabitation. And it just got me thinking about a reality TV show, The Bachelor and the Bachelorette, where one person gets to sleep or, hang out or basically live with, a whole bunch of other like a one woman live with a whole bunch of other men, go on many dates with them. She's basically seeing them in their home environment per se lah, because the TV cameras are always on them. So she sees almost every part of them, and you could argue that that's really them. But the statistics of how many of those couples actually um, last are very, 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 very low. Um, and I would argue that this isn't just a Hollywood thing, lah. It has come uh, to where we are, and I'm not guessing, but I know that's one of the reasons why we have been getting so many of these questions at different forums that we are at, because it has somewhat become a norm. It has become, what we have seen or what we have watched on television has become, a normal part of life. Um, so I don't deny that, what Kwang was saying just now, that how non-believers might actually argue that living together, you might get to know the person better because of habits and things like that. But as Marianne and Ethan mentioned just now as well, I think it's just part of the process that was meant to be safe for marriage too, which includes sexuality, sex, for each other. So um, many people would also many non-believers would also argue that the reason you live together, or the reason why you would have sex before marriage, is because you want to know whether you're so-called compatible, in their words, right? Before they actually make a decision before marriage. um, so i i I think it's a really relevant topic for where we are, and for the people that are watching, the young people in our, even in our country. um, so with that said, I mean, let's let's go down from just cohabitation. Let's go down from to something a bit smaller. What do you all think about, let's say, a guy going to the girl's family house to stay, or the girl going to the guy's family's house to stay over? Not, they're obviously not in the same room, but in the same home.
So I will present the non-Christian background first, because that's what I've seen. um, I would definitely say, as long as they're not together, it'll be okay. From what I can tell lah. As long as they're not in the same room, not in the same bed, not in the same, or whatever lah. Okay, they're not together, then it's okay. Like for example, let's say, okay, of course the most ideal is if if you're a girl and you have brothers, then your brothers, they sleep with your brother lah, right? Then you have like the awkward guy, like, who is this? Like, okay, this guy's friend, like, okay, but that can happen. So in some sense, it's less dangerous. But if I were to comment from a Christian perspective, I would say the fact that you are coming on to the house, staying over, I think is a big deal. Even if it's just friends also, I think it's already a big deal. So the only thing I would ask is like, I won't give a yes or no, but more like, is this a serious relationship? Why would I allow someone who is clearly not your husband or wife yet to stay over? Like, even if it's, for, again, I don't know what would be the circumstance, but no matter what it is, of course, not to stay overnight is the best, in my opinion, because things can still happen. I don't know. I've not experienced that or heard about it, but to be safe, I would say no. Yeah.
I will tag on from Dylan in the sense that when you consider, okay, maybe this person I'm going out with, this person I'm in a relationship with, wants to come over to stay at my place with parents and family members all still staying, of course, in the same house. I think questions that you need to ask yourself is like, will there still be a room or opportunity in which, I'm talking about room and opportunity, for us to end up in a situation where we find that it's very easy to compromise. You get what I mean? Compromise on holiness and push things to the max, because you never know, right? You never know. And I think that, for example, the easiest, clearest question would be like, okay, if say my girlfriend or my boyfriend's going to stay over, will there be times where it's just the two of us alone in the house with nobody else, because everyone has gone to work, right? Say pre-COVID times, then that leaves you in a very tricky situation, because at that point, right, for the how many hours that perhaps both of you are alone in the house, no one's there to see. There's no safeguard. It's just basically two of you leaving yourself in a very precarious and a very vulnerable situation. And like I said, if you think you're strong, be very careful, because that's the time where you need to be extra on your guard against temptation, against like anything that can lead you into sin. So I would go with Dylan to say that you really, really, really need to ask the question, like, is it really necessary? To even to stay, say, in the same house, if you're in a relationship but you're not married yet, even if on certain occasions there are people in the house. So that's good questions to ask.
Yeah, I think if we had quite strong positions of cohabitation, technically, even if the significant other comes into the family home, by definition, that is cohabitation.
You mean to stay prolonged, right, Guang?
Yeah,
Right.
stay prolonged. Yeah, I think I don't know whether we want to address like staying just 1 or 2 nights, or staying prolonged, or is it the same thing also? Because exactly what Marianne said, like, are there opportunities where holiness can be compromised?
I don't know whether I have differed opinions since I've grown up. So growing up, I think my parents were pretty strict with opposite genders being in contact with, when I say being in contact, it's like, for example, I give the example of in my room, I have one sister, right? So in my room, girls can't come into my room unless the door is wide open. And guys can't go into my sister's room unless the door is wide open. I think growing up, my parents, in a sense, trusted us a little bit more. We knew what we've the rules have been quite ingrained in us. So even if we were with an opposite gender, we would be in an open area. Even if we were, in a sense, alone, it would be like in the living room or the kitchen, somewhere where somebody could walk in on us. With the staying over issue, I think I don't think I really had a black and white perspective on this. I've always thought that maybe because I live in Klang, maybe if I had a girlfriend in Klang, there will be no necessity for it. But obviously, my girlfriend, now fiance, is from PJ, and so it is in a sense inconvenient to travel up and down if you're going to see each other on consecutive days. And I know couples obviously with a longer distance than that. I mean, David talked about his relationship with Linda. Linda is in Johor and David's here in the Klang Valley. So that makes it even harder.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the parents and the family as well. I think some parents, even though they're Christians, they are okay with it and they kind of encourage it. Like they want to get to know you better kind. They want you to feel like part of the family. But I feel like, yeah, there really needs to be trust, and also like the perception of why are you waiting until marriage? And like, your own safeguard, your own self, for your holiness, and your, like we really talk a lot about boundaries, drawing lines, and making sure that that we are not like even anywhere close to falling into temptation.
I think because you see why I have to trust my partner and why my partner has to trust me is because the home is not the only place where you could fall into temptation. You could go on a date and go somewhere and sneak off somewhere on your own. You could be in a car and you could do something that might lead you into falling even further. So it's not just a home. I'm not going on dates. Then next time, anybody will need a chaperone all the time. So I do have one clause or exception though. I would think that you should only do this, or if you only should go over to your significant other's home to stay over, or for them to come over. I think Dylan or Kwang mentioned it just now. Only if you really feel like the relationship is serious and you're mature enough, and you have talked about these things. If you have not talked about these things, if you don't trust the other person enough, and maybe even by age, I personally won't encourage someone in their teens to do this, for example, right? So but we've talked about age not being so much of a big deal, but more maturity lah. So as I said, if you're not mature enough, if you don't trust the person enough, if you've not talked about it, I think these are things that I would encourage someone to avoid going over or asking someone to come and stay over lah. Yeah.
I think the bottom line at the end, sorry.
No, Marianne, go first.
Yeah, I think the bottom line at the end of the day is safeguarding not just yourself, but also if you are being other person-centered, learning to safeguard the other person, right? To ensure that both of you do not compromise holiness, do not do anything that displease God at the end of the day. And I think, Joel, you're absolutely right in saying that if you have the intention to sin, you can do it. You can basically sin anywhere, right? It's like because there's ample. The mind can come up with ample possibilities, right, to find opportunities to indulge in sin. And so the house is not the only place that it can happen now. But I think that the bottom line at the end of the day is to take the strongest precautions, the strongest safeguards as possible. And how that may work out from couple to couple may differ. Right, may differ from couple to couple, but it's honest conversation that you will need to have with one another in order to come up with what would work out best. And always, I say at the end of the day, get somebody who is like either your mentor, someone older than you that you can trust. If you're ever in doubt about doing anything, talk to them, because if they know you and they are spiritually mature, they will be able to provide you with good godly guidance. So and they will also know that you will be accountable to them as well. So these are like safeguards that you can put up in making this kind of decisions. And I'm not talking about, I'm very wary when it comes to like prolonged cohabitation, even if there are other people in the household. But I'm saying like if you have to make a trip, or if you have to do this particular thing for a short period of time, just make sure that somebody else is kind of in the know, or somebody else recognizes that this thing is happening, and after much consideration and discussion with the two of you, say that okay, it seems to be something that is all right lah. So I think that's very important as an added safeguard, and as just for accountability sake.
Wrong?
Yeah, so I think so that at least we can make it clear it's not a gray area if it's just the two of you in the same house.
Correct.
I think that's something that we have talked extensively at the start of this talk. But it becomes essentially a gray area when it is part of the family home, and then let's say there's other people in the house, and then that's where Marianne's principle of taking extra safeguards and drawing boundaries that comes in. So at least everyone is clear watching this.
So I would always encourage what Marianne mentioned just now, like just take the stronger safeguard, and you shouldn't shy away from talking about it lah. Not only with your significant other, as I said, as Marianne also puts it just now, like with your mentors, with people that are going along with you for the journey. Both Yvonne and myself talk to our own respective mentors about these issues before, where we set our boundaries prior to even our relationship, and even when we got into a relationship very early on. I remember even few weeks into our relationship, I remember going to a mentor and talking to him about these things, like what was his experience like. I've even talked to some of you here about about these issues, and we've shared experiences prior to this episode. So I think it's something we or in a sense the church shouldn't shy away from lah. It's as I say, it's a topic that we should continue talking about it so that we um, not just educate, but I think we inspire what is godly lah, right? And I think that is more important than just hearing from other influencers like the media and Hollywood, like we mentioned just now. Yeah, any other advice or thoughts about cohabitation and boundaries?
I think what I can say is that maybe there are times where it is unavoidable because there seems to be that possibility, lah, especially when you're in a relationship, whether it's prolonged or temporary. Lah. But I do agree lah, that in the end, you don't want to suffer the consequences when something wrong happens. Because even more so, it's like if it doesn't work out, then like this will be like a baggage to your next relationship with something that you don't want to do. Lah. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. Kwang?
Yeah, I think I'll just echo Marianne's thoughts, which is the idea of taking the strongest stand. My parents are, actually quite strong in the sense that if let's say a girl can't go back home or whatnot, there's the Damansara in outside my house there, can just my parents say, we will rent a room and she can stay there, kind of thing. So there is harder stance,
Yep.
And I totally understand, and it is something that that if that at the end you just don't want. I think going back to the very thing that I started also, like you just don't want how other people might want to look into the family as well, and especially as Christian leaders. And then you never know in terms of the sense that you take as Christian leaders that maybe, biblically speaking, the term weaker Christians or Christians who have weaker faith might see differently. Conscience might be challenged. And at the end, I think I'll just reiterate the idea. Just take the stronger sense. It's not going to kill anyone, lah. Yeah. Yeah.
B?
Yeah, there's always ways to make sure that you're not alone. Yeah, or like just like rooming with people of the same gender is much better. Especially, only after you're married, then you can go on holiday together and stuff. Like just the two of you. If not, I think it's really you're setting yourself up lah. Because so that's just for when we can travel and go on holidays.
Thanks, Marianne.
I would say that the Christian needs to be aware of what our life is all about. And so, we always talk about praise and worship being like this session in church where you sing songs and stuff. But I think when we go back to the truth, like Romans 12 verse 1 tells us, like, in light of what God has done for us, therefore, right, in view of God's mercies, in view that Christ has died, he has redeemed us, he has called us to himself, he has set us apart to be a people, all of that, we can go and read Romans, do a Bible study on that. The very fact is that your whole life is an act of worship to God. And what does that mean? I think Paul follows up in verse 2 by saying that, do not be conformed to the world. So everyone in the world now is telling you cohabitation, is fine, like it's a practical thing to do, go ahead, do it. So it's safe, you regret, etc. But you're not to be conformed to the world, but you are supposed to be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And in the renewal of your mind is that you should be able to know what is God's will, pleasing and perfect, and seek to pursue that will, to live a life of obedience in accordance with God's will. And I think that's the same for Christians when you consider the whole topic of cohabitation. Now, we go against the grain of popular culture. We do what's counterculture because we always know from the beginning that we were going to stick out, right? We were already going to be set apart. And we're supposed to live in such a way that we will cause others to ask, like, why do people live this way, lah? What in the world are they living for? But prayerfully, ultimately, it leads them to the question, like, who are they ultimately living for? It's not just for ourselves. It's not just for the person you're in a relationship with, but it's for Jesus, lah. So that's just some thoughts there.
I just want to bring up two things. The first thing is something Marianne brought up just now about safeguarding the other person as well. Very early on, I think I mentioned this in a recent forum that we had. Very early on in our relationship, Ethan and I had the stance that as long as we are not married, we are actually preparing the other person, either for each other or for someone else. So if you're a guy and you are doing things to a girl, imagine that her future husband might be looking at that and saying, "What are you doing to my wife?" The same thing you could think, can you imagine if another guy is doing the same thing you are doing to another girl? Would you be upset? So safeguard your partner, safeguard your girlfriend or your boyfriend, and prepare them either for yourself or for someone else, because ultimately they're still your brother or sister in Christ. The second thing I want to bring up as we bring this episode to a close is, if there's anyone out there who feels guilt or feels guilty because you feel like you've heard all of us today and you feel like you've already failed or you've already fallen into the temptation that we've talked about today, I want you to know that what Jesus did on the cross and his resurrection brings us grace, and we can find forgiveness only in Jesus. Jesus lived and died for us, and he paid that entire cost of sin for us. So I want you to know that there have been many times in scripture where there was an opportunity for Jesus to condemn someone who was sexually immoral, and yet he chose to show them mercy and grace. David, who not David, SU David that you see in every episode, King David in the Bible. Most of you will be familiar with his sexual immorality with Bathsheba, and yet, by the end of his life, because he repented and he came back to God, God called him a man after God's own heart. So I believe that even if you have fallen, come back to Jesus, and there's always forgiveness that you can find. So with that, I just want to thank you all for listening to us and our thoughts. We are greatly humbled by it. And we just want to open this time up again for you to please ask questions, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram. Follow us at suu.my. A lot more ideas sticking in our heads, and we hope that you'll be able to not only participate but contribute as well. So we see you on the next episode 8 of Let's Chat Eavesdrop Edition. See you all. Bye-bye.